Liquid Bits marketing manager, and I am here with my coworker Mike to chat it up for this round of the vlog. I was really excited. I didn't have to lure Mike. He volunteered with an adorable hands up emote. So thank you, Mike. If you haven't met Mike Chorak yet, he is Liquid Bits chief architect, and he brings some necessary levity to our team at Liquid Bit. What's up, Mike? Thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Happy to be here. Not much. Just, well, you interrupted my work. I was actually working, but I guess I could take a break and we can do this thing. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Mike is, he said, what do you think? I'm a clown. His humor is what keeps our team going. And as you know, a lot of devs are under fire these days. So Mike brings the levity, brings the hard work, and is always good for a joke or a one-liner. So thank you, Mike, for being here. And thanks for always making us smile. To kind of get things kicked off, we're going to share a couple memes. And the first one is a classic. You've probably seen this one around. So it's on your screen. And Mike, is this true?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, like we try to anticipate what users will need, but somehow always manage to miss the mark. But that's, it keeps us, employed.
It really does.
But one of the interesting things about working, we try to work closely with the community, and they're really good about providing feedback. You probably heard this from us time and time again, but it has been fun seeing the things that we create out in the wild and how people respond to them, and trying to take that feedback, back and try to improve, iterate, and yeah, it's been fun. But we do kind of feel like, the cat in the box sometimes.
Exactly. Well, and also people like make new games out of the game that we made. You wouldn't really guess, like there'd be these one-on-one tournaments all the time in the ladder league. Shout out to the BGL. They're always trying new things with the game to keep it interesting for them. So cool. Our next meme, and I do feel like we've said this before. So are you trying to get into game dev, guys? Just so you know, it's a whole lot of pretty fun. And then Mike, how does a game get released? Like, is this not humor? Is this the actual timeline of?
Yeah, it's, how does it get released? I don't know. Blood, beer, sweat, and tears is what we used to say. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it's a grind. It can be. It's a lot of fun too, but it can be a grind. At the end of the day, you're trying to ship the thing. And it's like you make promises. It's like, oh, we're trying to get the thing, release on deadline, etc. But no, it is. It's an interesting question. How does a game get released? I'm thinking back on like the 3 or 4 years that we spent building Killer Queen Flag, and like all the different things that we tried, the different iterations of things, the different technologies we swapped in and out during the whole process. It really is. You roll up your sleeves. You show up to work, you try to get it done, and then at the end of the day you release it and you hope that it's received well. But yeah, there's no other way to do it than
and you got to go back to the beginning of that timeline, like, yay, this is fun, I'm making a game, and
oh my gosh,
keep that momentum going.
Yeah, in the beginning it's all greenfield. It's anything is possible,
Yes.
And that's true of, like, I found of like software development in general. Like when you first start a project, that's the most exciting, because really it is, anything is possible. But as you kind of continue development, things start to get a little bit more solidified, and it's harder to turn the ship, so to speak. Right. So but yeah, it really is. It's just a lot of time and effort.
So keep it fun. If you're out there making games, get somebody like Mike on your team, which this is a good segue, because learning a little bit more of Mike's background, what is a technical game designer made of?
A tech game designer?
Yeah, a little bit of game design is like our little, how to become a technical game designer. This meme is kind of cute just because I always like pushing all the buttons for my sodas, but it's a little bit of game design, but a lot of what Mike brings to the table.
Yeah, I suppose I think much to our game designer chagrin, I kind of inject ideas, but we all do that, right? We all inject our ideas into the game design meetings, but it's like, you don't want to be obtrusive, and the game designers have a vision, and you don't want to like kind of step on toes. I can be guilty of that sometimes, but speaking from personal experience, being such a small team, we wear a lot of hats. So, my background is in computer programming, and, specifically game programming. And so that's my wheelhouse. And I tend to take more of a technical role. I'm not so much of the creative type, but being passionate about video games, playing video games like my entire life, you tend to pick up on certain things that you like, certain things that you'd like to see in games, and try to, I don't know, try to inject that as much as you can. But I think it's a really important skill to have, like to be a technical game designer. It's like, I mean, they're so hard to find. I feel like if you, so, all right, so game design, right? You have a vision that you're trying to communicate to the programmers or to, other members of the team. And in that process, there's like a little bit lost in the translation, because the game designer has it in their head and they're trying to communicate that to you. And when you receive it, you change it a little bit. And so if you can do both, if you can game design and sit at the computer and actually like, put something on the screen, I feel like that can be a much truer representation of what you were trying to do. Jonathan Blow is a great example of this.
Okay, definitely drop that info down there.
Yeah, he's a great game designer. I mean, I think so. I love his games. I played Braid. I played a bit of The Witness, but he's one of these types that he's also, I mean, he's a great game designer, but he's also a really good programmer. And those two things I find are rare in my experience to find, at least. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's like, it's one of those things that like, it can be a solo project. It could also take a team, bring a little bit of it all. But I think just from working with you and knowing you bring a lot of like the reality to like what's possible in programming and, where that fits within the scope of the game. So
Yeah.
Cool. Our last meme that we're going to take a look at is one that I actually made. If you watched the spoiler alert on our last vlog, it is true. Liquidbit is in the process of putting something new out, and I always have to laugh because these are actually Mike's words. Downloads fat, juicy build, hot off the griddle. But then, if you've ever made a game, Mike, what really happens during a play test cycle?
It's kind of become an inside joke. We have playtests every Friday. We submit a build. We try to get it as early as possible out there so people get a chance to download it and whatnot. But I think almost every single time the first build we push has a problem. There's a bug or something. So we have to push another build and another build. And I know like one day it was like 5 builds or something. Everyone was like, come on, So now I've kind of trained the team to like, I'll push the first build, but nobody downloads it.
Exactly.
They know another one's coming.
Right.
So.
I love it. Cool. Well, we're going to segue a bit into some of the Liquidbit stuff, humor aside, which you guys, it's absolutely necessary when you're in this industry. So thanks, Mike, for bringing it to the table and chatting through those memes with us. When did you start with Liquidbit? You're one of the first guys. You're a founder, been here for a while.
Yeah, I'm one of the first 3. Yeah, it was Matt,
Crazy.
Adam, and I. When did we start? I'm terrible with timelines. My brain doesn't store.
I know. I should have brought that information to the table, but
it's okay.
I think it's been about 5-6 years.
We actually did start December 2016, so it's going on 6.
Okay, right on.
It's really weird to think about that it's been that long. Like I feel like time traveled or something. Like holy crap! Like. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember how much time we spent developing KQB. I think it was 4 years, right? Did we launch
2019? So we're coming up on our 3rd birthday already.
Yeah, wow.
Crazy. But you mentioned it earlier, in a team this small, you are our chief architect, but you really wear many hats. Chief architect is something you see in larger companies as well as small, but what does that mean for you, and what's some of the general description of chief architect at a studio, dev studio?
So I remember when we started this company, it was like Matt, Adam, and I were sitting in, I think it was Adam's kitchen, just drinking beers, and like we just quit our jobs. We're like, what are we doing? So we're trying to assign roles, and kind of flippantly, Adam, what role do you want? CTO. I'm like, what do you want? I'm like, I think Matt was like chief architect. I'm like, yeah, sure. So it
Yeah,
wasn't really, because we knew we were such a small team and we're all going to do a little bit of everything. Those roles weren't really taken that seriously, but it's kind
sure.
of interesting. Like as the company has evolved over the years, we have kind of fit into our roles. So I guess they were
Yeah,
kind of, there was some foresight there, despite our best efforts. But so chief architect, because my background is in kind of like game program. I've always been interested in it when I
mhm,
was a kid. It's kind of one of the lucky few that like knew what they wanted to do, when they were
nice.
like. So I spent a lot of my time studying game development, reading books, articles, just trying to keep my finger on the pulse. I was just always really into it. So even though no matter what I was doing, like I did iOS development for a long time, iPhone development, but
Mhm,
while I was doing that, I was still like in my spare time, like, ooh, what's this new technology or
that's
whatever.
awesome.
So I guess I had kind of the most experience in that regard. Matt had actually, now he didn't release a game, but he worked on some prototypes, so he probably had the second most experience. And then Adam, I don't think ever did game
Yeah,
development.
as we learned that last time, and he
Right.
also noted he's not like a visual programmer either, so he's
Yeah.
really learning a lot and thrown to the wolves here. Um, maybe that chief architect role and maybe kind of you coming in with the most knowledge really kind of put you at the forefront of figuring out this networking, multiplayer gaming, cross-platform.
Right.
Before we get into our rapid fire questions
Yeah.
about that, what what does it take? Like, what are the considerations? Like, you want to make a multiplayer game.
Right.
How are you going to get people to connect with each other?
How to make a multiplayer game. Well, first you Google how to make a multiplayer game, because that's what I did more or less. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I will say this: if you're making a game and you have the slightest inclination, like that it might be multiplayer, but first of all, decide that early on, figure that out, and so ask yourself the question: is this game going to be multiplayer? If the answer is maybe, then start architecting it as a multiplayer game, because like the takeaway from that is to retrofit multiplayer into a game that wasn't designed to be multiplayer is just a big pain in the ass, right? It
Yeah,
is a pain. So it's interesting, like in software development, the decisions that you make are often a function of like the constraints that are put on you. And you know back in like the early 90s, which like John Carmack, he's making like Doom and stuff. The constraints he had on him were like shitty hardware.
yeah,
The clock rates were slow, the RAM was slow, so you had to be a wizard basically, and come up with all these tricks and hacks and algorithms to get the job done. The reason I bring that up is because the constraint that we put on ourselves early, because we knew we were building a multiplayer game, was that it was going to be multiplayer. So with that constraint in mind, dictated the architecture decisions that we made, which had a few effects, like both kind of good and bad. Some
yeah,
of the bad was that like it was harder to prototype certain things, because we were constantly having to worry about the multiplayer aspect of it. And we were using Unity, but we had like this completely custom multiplayer framework that we built. And so, full disclosure, it wasn't as robust as something you'll see in like Unreal Engine, or even Unity's networking for that matter. So like iterating things quickly was difficult for us. But we also gained some things, like the ability to record a game session, and then replay it back in the engine at a later time. So like
okay,
if one of our playtesters had like they found a bug, they could just give us their file, their log, and we could replay their game session frame
wow.
by frame and step through the code. And that was like an indispensable tool.
Mhm.
An idea that I lifted actually from going back to John Carmack id Software, like Quake. They released that source code, and it was one of the things I remember seeing in the code was that ability to replay those gameplay sessions. And yeah, it turned out to
Nice.
be a huge win for us. So
That's awesome. Now, that's like a consideration that a lot of multiplayer games you suggest to set something up like that so you can go
oh yeah,
back and look at
oh
your
yeah.
logs? Yeah,
I mean, I would
great
say so,
advice.
yeah. And then the ability to run like multiple sessions of the game under one process. So like you think of a multiplayer game, like multiple people are on different computers playing, but as a developer, you're trying to test the thing. That's not very feasible. So you want the ability to have multiple players on one computer. That's something we also had very early on, the ability to switch the view between players and set up different testing scenarios and whatnot. For a game like Killer Queen Black, it was actually, testing was quite difficult because it was an 8-player game. And so we created tools to do different things, like to be able to record a sequence of inputs over time and then loop it, like run it in a loop. So like we could have like a warrior flying, and then hit stop recording, and then it would go back to the beginning and play that again, and it would just kind of loop that, and then I could attack the warrior and do different things. That was super useful.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so tools are super important when you're making a multiplayer game. They're hard to test, notoriously.
Now, so you're making a multiplayer game, but in the beginning, do you consider cross-platform? Because I know that's, something that was really important to us. And so that's part of that kind of planning.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I mean, especially I feel like for indie developers, cross-platform is almost a necessity because you want to reach the largest player base possible. So the more platforms you're on, the more people you're going to reach. And luckily for us, right at that time, like cross-platform was starting to become a thing. Like Xbox kind of opened up the doors, and the Nintendo Switch, I don't remember if they launched with crossplay or if that was something that they had later, but it all kind of aligned for us, thankfully.
Yeah, especially with the 4v4, it's nice to have whatever system you're on to be able to join. That was a lot of info already, but you guys, it's time for our rapid fire questions. Mike has touched base on some of these before, so it might just be kind of quick, but we are here for memes, matchmaking, and Bears on My, so we're going to kick it off with the networking. Chain of action while you're playing. Because I heard what we're seeing is not really real time.
Right. Okay, so these are rapid fire questions. Does that mean it's rapid fire answers too?
No, you can. I'm not going to conversate after the end of your question. You just keep on answering and I'll ask. But that's kind of a long answer, I'm sure, for this one.
Yeah. So how does that work? How does networking work? How are games networked, right? So there's different ways you can do it depending on the type of game that you're making. I think we probably did something that people weren't expecting. We didn't actually use like what do you call it? Lockstep model, like you see in a lot of like fighting games. We use the traditional first-person shooter client-server architecture. And so the way that works, right, is that you have a server, which is the authority of the game world, the simulation, and then all the clients connect to the server. And all the clients really are doing is they're receiving the game world from the server as the server sees it and displaying that to the user. And then the user is providing input with their keyboard and mouse or gamepad or whatever and sending that to the server. So the server is processing inputs, updating the game world, and sending the world back to the clients. Now, because it's like this back and forth. You want that to be as fast as possible. But there's latency, right? Speed of light. So it takes time for this information to travel back and forth. So you have to do all these like tricks and like workarounds to try to hide the latency and try to make the game feel as responsive as possible. So it doesn't feel like there's that delay.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop you there because that leads into our next rapid fire question. Tips for connectivity and lag troubleshooting. And this is on the user. So let's say, the user is having those connectivity and lag issues. Like, how can they troubleshoot it? Knowing what you know, and after setting it up, like, what are some of the first things you want to do?
Well, it's an interesting question because it's something that we've battled since the launch of the game, since before the launch of the game even. And
but it's not just Killer Queen Black.
It's not. This goes back to, right. Yes. This goes back to what we're talking about, making a multiplayer game. The first thing you have to understand is the internet sucks. And it's great, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't built for multiplayer games, like real-time stuff like this. So if you're making a multiplayer game from that side of things, understanding that the network, the internet is not trying to route your packets the fastest way possible. It's usually trying to do it the cheapest way possible. And this means that like one packet can go one route and then it gets congested and the next packet goes another route and then the next packet gets there before the first packet does. So they actually come in out of order. All these crazy things can happen. For a user, that doesn't mean much, but for tips for connectivity, like, first of all, get off of wireless if you're on it. Like,
You heard it here, folks.
oh my gosh, especially if you live in like an apartment like I used to. It's awful, like so much interference. I know, like, why was it Wi-Fi v6 is coming out, it's supposed to help with some of these issues, but if you can, like, just connect your computer, your console directly to your router. Like, the other thing you want to check, obviously, is if anybody's watching Netflix or YouTube or, you know,
streaming will slow that down.
Right. I know that if you can log into your router and go into the settings, there's usually like a quality of service section. And I've heard mixed things, like turning it on can make it worse, turning it on can make it better, depends on your router. But the idea is that it'll prioritize network traffic for games if you set it up to do that. So if, like, people are watching Netflix and YouTube on your network, and you're trying to play like Killer Queen Black, it'll prioritize Killer Queen Black. So that's one thing you can try doing.
Good to know. Hot tips from Mike. I love it. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. That was kind of Killer Queen Black centric, but I really want to talk a little bit more about Mike and your programming knowledge. Where did you learn, and what's some advice for aspiring game devs?
Where did I learn?
The program.
So I was always interested in video. Like, when I was a kid, I was playing Sega. I tell this story all the time, but I remember, like, not just playing the game, but I was like looking at the controller, like, what is it when I push this button that makes Sonic jump? Like, I just had this like insatiable curiosity. I actually took the controller apart as if that was going to tell me anything. I'm like,
that's
looking
awesome.
at it. And so my brother is he's like 10 years older than me. He moved, I went into the military, but, you know, while he's, you know, working in Virginia, he sent me a gateway computer, my first computer. He bought me a computer.
And how old are you at this point?
I was like
school,
sixth grade, so like 10 or 11.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know. And I wanted to know everything about it, you know. So I scoured the internet for everything I could find. I didn't really have money for books, so I did a lot of like online tutorials and stuff. Not the greatest way to learn, I'll be honest. It really isn't. You can pick up a lot of bad habits.
Okay.
Which I certainly did. But like, now there are great resources. I mean, like, I mentioned Jonathan Blow earlier. He's got like this whole YouTube series where he's making a game engine from scratch. He gives you a lot of good stuff on there. Casey Muratori, he's got this YouTube channel called Handmade Hero.
Okay.
And I think he's been going on for like 5 years now, but he's making a game from scratch, and every line of code that he writes, you see it on the stream, and he explains why he's doing it. Like, this would have been an indispensable resource for me when I was a kid. Yeah, it's really cool. It's pretty heavy. It's like old school C programming, but yeah. And then there's a series of books like Game Programming Gems are great. Game Engine Architecture. I think an author from used to work at or still working at Naughty Dog. I don't remember. Naughty Dog, the company that made Crash Bandicoot and the Uncharted series. Like, their tech house is really strong. Like, their tech is super impressive. So there's a lot of good stuff in that book. I like it.
And you guys can find all these resources in the blog part of the vlog. We got it all there for you, linkable. So cool. As far as that base, which sounds almost grassroots, you're finding out online, you're doing what you can, pulling from peers. Since then, like, what are some of the significant advances in gaming and programming for games?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Significant advances. I mean, here's the thing. Like, when I first started getting into this stuff, it was like a ragtag team of developers and artists in a garage could build a game and make millions of dollars, right? That can still happen, but like they did it from scratch, right? Like, they did it all the work, because none of this stuff, like, they didn't have game engines back then, right? But now we have things like Unity and Unreal, and we're using Unreal for our current project. We use Unity for Killer Queen Black. But I mean, these tools are indispensable, especially Unreal, I would say. Sorry, Unity, but Unreal's open source. I mean, we've run into a few snags here and there. They just released Unreal 5, which I'm sure you've heard about. If you've been if you're watching this blog, you've very likely heard about it. It's crazy,
Yeah.
but it's new tech, right? So there's a little bit of, you know, a little wrinkles here and there that still need to be ironed out, but the code is open source. So we were able to go in, find the problem, fix it, and it's just an incredible source to learn from. But so what's so cool about these engines, obviously, is that it allows people who may not have the technical expertise necessary to roll this tech by hand, but have a great idea for a game.
Yeah.
They can just, you know, download one of these engines and get started. So it's really cool.
Very cool. I know, I love watching all the Unreal 5 like add-on demos on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you see some of these really crazy waterfalls are one of them. Just some really cool things that the machine is capable of. So awesome. Lastly, in our rapid fire ish, so what would you like to see next in the game dev industry?
That's a great question. You know, going back to Unreal, there's two things. I want to see like just more people creating interesting things.
Yeah.
Which is great that that's happening. I mean, really, I mean, like sort of like Steam came out and that was huge. Like you just like a plethora of games on there that you can download, and some just these kind of unknown gems that you can find, right? So I want to see more of that. But like artificial intelligence is kind of becoming a thing, you know, like it's kind of huge lately. There's so many advances in that. I follow this really cool YouTube channel. It's called 2-Minute Papers by Dr. Jael Nola Itfayer. I'm probably butchering that name, but he basically a couple videos a week, he goes over some advancement in artificial intelligence usually, or computer graphics or something like that. But to see the stuff that's coming out, the stuff that's possible, like Google's Lambda, you probably heard about that in the news, the Google employee who thought that their AI was sentient and needed rights, you know, GPT-3, things like this. What was the is OpenAI's shoot, I'm blanking on the name. Is it Wally or Dolly? Dolly.
Oh
that's
yeah,
it.
with your imagery.
Right. Yeah. So you type in a prompt and it'll create an image of that prompt. I want to see like AI, like more advanced AI in games.
Yeah.
I want to see like a non-player character that's like responding to me, like the things I'm doing in kind of a human, like believable way. I think we're a ways away from that, but like some of this like chatbot stuff that's coming out of Google, that might be interesting. So yeah, we'll see. I think, yeah, short answer, AI in games would be cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll share some of those resources so you guys can dig a little bit further on your own. So thank you, Mike. I learned a lot. The questions were very basic, but man, there is a lot that goes into networking, matchmaking, getting people together to play games. And it can be very heavy. So you got to kind of focus on the rewarding part, and you know, it's really something special when you make something and then people are actually playing it. So there is a reward there, so stick with it. Make sure you get some humor on your team. We are going to kind of wrap this vlog up, but lastly, I got to give a shout out to the Xbox ambassadors because they inspired this last segment. Mike and I had sat on just a kind of play and chat with them, and we'll share that link as well. But they were asking us some bee facts. And maybe, as you saw in our title, we have a Bears Oh My, so we'll get into that. I'm going to quiz Mike. So thank you, Blonde But Geeky and Ginger Ale. That was back in October of 2021. Stealing some of your questions. Let's see how good Mike does. 3B questions. Are you ready, Mike?
Ready.
Okay. Question 1. How many eyes do honeybees have?
They have 5 eyes. They have like 2 big eyes that can see shapes and details, and they have a bunch of lenses on the eyes.
Yeah.
They could. The one thing I learned is they could see UV light, which I thought was crazy.
That's really
like
cool.
Certain flowers give off like different UV signatures, and they can key in on that. So two big eyes, and then like 3 small eyes that kind of form a triangle on the top.
Okay.
And they use that so they can see where the sun is, so they can navigate.
This guy, he's funny and he's smart, because I was going to drop those facts. I did not put this in our lineup of questions. Mike, you're like reading my mind. The three small eyes in the center, like boom, you win.
Yeah,
bonus
cool.
bonus on that one. Okay, how many legs do honeybees have?
They have 6, so they have like two legs in the front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back, and they use them for different things. They use all 6 of them for walking and running around and stuff. The front legs they use for like building things and carrying things, and then the hind legs they use to carry the pollen back to the hive.
Can you see? That's my bonus fact. Like, literally, we did not plan this. This
No,
guy
we
did.
didn't. No, we planned the 3 questions, full disclosure, but I think bees are dope, so I kind of just was on Wikipedia going through that, like that click where you're just like, yeah. So like honeybees have like these pouches in their hind legs. They put that stuff back there. Other bees have like little curly hairs and stuff. I didn't even realize. I didn't really get how bees collect pollen, like what they do. Maybe this is common knowledge.
Yeah, no.
But they like go into the flower and they just kind of rustle around in there, and they collect all that stuff on the hair on their body. And I think honeybees have hair on their eyes.
Okay.
So they can get a ton of this stuff, and then they just kind of groom themselves. That's exactly how they do it.
I mean, they're amazing. They do actually.
And then
that's one of the dances in Killer Queen Black. It's getting the pollen off.
And they put it in their back pockets. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like people call the berries, balls, orbs. I've never heard pollen, but you would think that makes in the bears and bees of the loose character
you have to ask
lore.
You have to ask
Okay, so my last bee question: how do honeybees communicate?
So it's actually pretty cute. They do like a dance. So I'd make a terrible honeybee.
I was thinking, no, I
cannot. No, but it's they go. So they find like a food source or a source of water, and they go back to the hive and they do like a dance. Like depending on how far away the thing is, they'll do a different dance. Closer things, it's like a circular dance, and far away things, it's more like a figure 8. But they vibrate and move their wings at different frequencies, and based on the intensity of that tells the other bees how far away things are, and based off of the angle that they're dancing tells them where the food source is relative to where the sun is in the sky at that time.
Okay, that's deep. I did not go that far.
I think the dance actually changes depending on what time of day it is, right? Because the sun would be in a different spot. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
I think we need a whole segment on bees one of these days. But this was super, super fun.
Work on my David Attenborough impersonation.
Oh yeah, you'd have to work hard. We could do that. We could do that because Mike, you can't see out his windows, but he's living in nature. Okay, all this honey talk. And the title of our segment, we're going to wrap things up with a quick little story, and we'll share the video with you here as well. But bear sightings, Mike, you had a recent bear in your neighborhood. Were they looking for honey? Were they playing Killer Queen Black? Were they dancing?
I got I just moved to Virginia, and my brother sends me a text. He's like, dude, look outside. And I look, and there's, sure enough, a bear just hanging out, just walking around. I think he was trying to get to the trash.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just one bear, actually. It was mama bear and 3 baby bears.
Yeah.
We got some video of it.
Well, yeah, we're sharing that video. And we just really appreciate everyone allowing the Liquid Bit team to kind of introduce ourselves and share a little bit more about game dev in this quick little vlog that we do. And Mike, your levity, like seriously, this guy keeps it real. He's a great guy to work with, a wizard of the programming world. But truly, I love our team syncs because Mike always makes us smile. So
thanks, Jackie. Appreciate that. I mean,
thanks, Mike. Really do you have any closing words for aspiring devs or anything you'd like to share before we go?
I feel like this is where I say something funny because you build me up so much. No, that's it.
Well, you guys are the greatest. Thank you again for tuning in. This is something that we're just starting out. So if you have any suggestions or any topics that you'd like to hear about, we would love to cover those and even get some guests on here soon. So make sure to check out the blog for all those hot links. Mike mentioned some amazing resources. And until then, keep your eyes out for bees, honey, bears, and play more multi. Yeah, there you go. Oh my. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.